We are back with another episode of the EventBuzz podcast, a show for connecting event planners and industry experts around the world, sharing planning advice, tips, hacks, and more. Today's guest is the founder of Endless Events, Will Curran, who is also an expert in marketing events and structuring a simplified planning process that works. Now producing events across the country for clients like Emerald City Comic-Con, Warner Brothers, and Uber, to name a few, has been named one of the most influential people in the meeting and events industry, one of the 40 under 40 event industry leaders, 35 entrepreneurs under the age of 35, and the highest customer satisfaction of any event company in the industry. Obviously, we are very excited to have him on the show and talk to him today. So let's get started. Hey, Will, thanks for coming on to the show. We are super excited to have you as you have a great background, experience in events. And so we have a lot to talk about. How are you doing today?
Thanks so much, Savannah. No, I'm such a pleasure to be here and get to hang out with you and everybody out there in the audience. And I'm doing great today. Today's a good day.
Awesome. So I think I just want to start out. I know a lot about you, but I wanted to just kind of introduce how you started working in the event space or how you got your start.
There's probably an EventIcons episode, which is our like podcast where we interview the icons of the industry. I think that I tell like the entire story from start to finish. So like if you ever want to hear the start to finish story, go check that episode out. It's pretty dope. But for me, just so everyone, the Cliff Notes version of it is I actually started being really a nerdy kid in high school. I loved computers and websites and electronic music, and I became a DJ. And eventually, when you become a DJ, people start asking you to DJ backyard parties. And before I knew it, I had a little DJ company going while I was in high school. Then I graduated to college and grew that company from being a DJ company to a production company, and really focused on the technology events, audiovisual, that sort of stuff. Graduated college and just kind of like had full-time energy to put into it and really started scaling up the company. We started going nationwide and doing events literally all over the country. And again, primarily focused on the production. So like the show flows and the AV and the production aspects, and kind of stayed in our lane for a while. And then, slowly we started doing more and more event technology stuff over the course of the years, because naturally when you do production, you're kind of like on the edge of event technology. And from there, pandemic ensues and everybody came to us because we were writing so much content online. A lot of people know Endless Events from, just how much content we put out onto the interwebs, our podcasts and all that stuff. So everyone kind of came to us and was like, help us. So the pandemic was actually pretty good for us. We got very busy, lots of clients coming on in. And, the big thing with it was that we realized that we were really good at production and we were advising people on lots of different things through our content. But, everybody was kind of looking to us, not for just the production. They were looking for like, how do you create a great event experience? How do I create audience engagement? How do I, create a meaningful community? All these things like that. And so, over the course of the last, probably 2-3 years since the start of the pandemic, we've basically been adding more and more services to the point where now we do full scale event management. So we're doing basically every aspect of a client's events from soup to nuts, and just, taking everything that we've done from writing all of our awesome content and all of our thought leadership and saying, we can help make events better into this new world that we are now living in.
Awesome. Is there something you guys specialize in, or is like, you're an expert in when it comes to your services? Because I know you said you're growing them.
Yeah. So like the big thing that we try to do, the kind of the spin that we have on event management, is that we try to use technology to solve problems that can make your event better, right? So for example, you in theory can do traditional signage, right? Yeah, you can print signs, you can do banners, all those things like that. But like in reality, like, is that really the best solution available to you? First of all, it's usually a big waste because you're putting the year and all those things like that on your signage. So like, let's talk from a sustainability aspect. That's probably a bad idea. But like also too, like now digital signage has gotten so much cheaper that you can actually do digital signage and not only show more messages and more images and things like that, but also you using your event technologies. Now you can dynamically show, different things. For example, outside of every breakout room, rather than calling it, the Sonoran room and go to the Sonoran room and it lists, some sessions for the day. You can literally show like capacity, how many people are there, when the next session is, what the title is of it. And, I think that's a very simple example, but using technology to make the process better. And I think we've in a similar way, very much integrated that into how we plan our events too. We're very technological forward, like we're early users of Slack. We, use Basecamp for all of our project management with our clients so they get insight into exactly everything that we're doing in all our tasks. So we're just using technology, I think, to just enhance events to make them better, but also enhancing the planning process too. So I think that's really where our speciality is kind of that forward thinking, futuristic way of doing things.
So you guys deal with a lot of not like tech savvy clients, but at least people that are familiar with it? Or do you ever deal with people that are kind of resistant to incorporating all this technology, more traditional?
You'd be surprised. It's a mix. So what's cool is that the people who are really technologically savvy come to us because they're like, you can keep up with me. And you're like, I love that. But then believe it or not, actually, the majority of our clients come to us and they're like, look, I need you to do this for me. And that's really where we pride ourselves in the excitement about what Endless can do, is just the fact that we're just kind of coming at it as like, let's make your life easier. Like that's a big like theme you'll see all across our website, across all of our messaging, is like, our goal is to make your life easier. We call it creating the equation, taking like a complex equation and making it as simple as A plus B plus C, making people's lives easier. So that attune kind of ends up hitting a lot of like our buyer personas, or a lot of like, hey, maybe I don't know exactly what I'm doing, which is totally cool because we're going to walk you through it and show you all the detail. We're going to help educate you along the way. And that's kind of the fun part of it.
Yeah. And so now that we are coming out of this pandemic, we're seeing more in-person events. Do you think events will lean more towards favoring in-person events, at least for a while, versus virtual? Or what do you think?
That's such a great question. So we're, recording this like the beginning half of 2022. And, I remember in 2020 ago, this is going to change everything. Finally, everyone's going to realize that you don't have to do in-person events, and it's going to break the way for hybrid. And, coming into 2021, we're like, yeah, hybrid's the thing. You need to do hybrid. And what's funny is like, I'm tracking every single person who downloads our content to know like what types of events they're planning. And if I do a pie chart of hybrid, in-person, virtual, the virtual side is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So I don't know if necessarily purely only virtual events is going to be the mainstay. But what we did see was a huge jump in hybrid events. What used to be, 1% of events were hybrid, and like, less than 1% was virtual. Like now it's like probably 50% of events are at least hybrid in some ways. So I think while virtual events themselves might be getting less and less popular, the desire to be virtual, though, needs to not only is going to stay, it needs to stay. So even if I'm wrong and like hybrid disappears and virtual disappears, I think it would be a shame to our industry and would put us so far back behind them where we really need to be.
Oh, yeah. Hybrid events there's a lot of benefits that come with it. Even at event types that you don't really consider events. We have a lot of school systems that actually started using our registration platform. I know, with the pandemic. Yeah, we've shifted to like helping educational events, which is something we were not doing at all prior to the pandemic, which is pretty cool. But they use us in a hybrid way as well, like just selling their tickets and stuff, because, that way relatives and people out of state or that can't make the games, or even like scouts for scouting, they can view it online. It's really interesting, but hybrid events they should definitely stay.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like there's no like, in the world and in the industry, we're talking about like diversity and inclusion when it comes to events. It's like adding a virtual component to your in-person event to make it hybrid, like, is the true way that you can truly reach the biggest part of the audience and truly make your events accessible. Because there are people who you don't know, if you're doing a purely only in-person event, that you're excluding only the people who can make it to there in person. But the one thing you'll learn is if you do a virtual event is how many more people out there would not only just, prefer virtual, but actually need it.
Yeah. And the one thing I see with virtual events too is that I'll see people that do live virtual events, and then I'll see people that do pre-recorded, kind of like webinars or whatnot that people can join. So I wanted to ask you on that, because I figured you'd have an opinion on that, how event planners can kind of figure out which option would be best for them, or if you even suggest doing pre-recorded or you say stick to live.
Yeah, I think it all depends on the audience, right? Like you really do need to understand and know your audience in and out really well, right? Like, so, consider building out your audience personas, which if anyone ever wants to learn how to build an audience persona, you can Google how to build an audience persona. And I think one of our Whiteboard Wednesday videos will pop up on there, or just search audience personas endless. And I'm sure something will pop up on Google for you. But build out your audience persona so you know them in and out, because that's going to really answer that question for you. However, like I think when people are thinking about their content, there's a bigger strategy, not just only deciding whether it's pre-recorded or it's going to be live, or whether you're going to be virtual or you're going to be in person. Is like the bigger trend is this move towards the community model. And so what I want people to start thinking about when it comes to their content is not thinking about my content is just living within my conference or my event or whatever it is, and that's the only place it lives, but instead it becomes a part of this like larger ecosystem. So I'll share you an example of how we kind of do this at Endless. So for example, if Endless were to do a webinar tomorrow, in fact, we're doing it in like I think a week or so, we're going to record it. And not only are we going to not like have it available for people to attend, but it's going to be on our website. Then what we're going to do is we're going to repurpose it into blog posts. We're going to republish it into social media graphics. And we're going to put all of that in. We're going to turn it into short little clips that we post. And so repurposing that content to more than just what it is. But then the true game is, why don't you take it where if you did your event and having, for example, a rebroadcast of it, and sure, it can be semi-live, but having it available for the community. So those who couldn't attend the event, but are paying $10 a month to be in your platform year round, because all these platforms are trying to move towards that model. So it's important to know. And I think we did a podcast on Ben Pick podcast about like why this shift is going to happen, but the community model's here and people want it. They're going to pay $10 a month and take that content, that semi-live content, whatever you did live, whatever it was, and put it back on the platform and give it access to people to let it continue on and live on there. I think that can be so powerful for your event. But yeah, I guess to your original question, definitely know your attendees is the most important thing. But no matter what you do, whether you do semi-live or in person, is like, just make the content good too. Like, we're all sick of PowerPoint.
You don't need a PowerPoint.
Slides. No, my gosh, we're all so done with that, right?
Yeah.
And I think that if you can create exciting, awesome content, and sometimes it means shortening, right? Making a 15-minute, presentation or 30-minute presentation. Sometimes that means, telling the presenter, hey, you don't get PowerPoint, make it more engaging. And sometimes it means just telling some presenters, hey, unfortunately, we're not going to have you present this year, right? And you know who those presenters are. It's the one that you like are like, oh my gosh, it's going to be our lowest attended. It doesn't get highest remarks, but I gotta please a sponsor. Don't do that. Like make it really good and make it just incredible, right? Make it like it's like Netflix, right? Make it so good that you literally get lost in how much good content there is, and there's more choice than there is in good content than there is in crappy content.
Yeah. I definitely agree. We don't need another PowerPoint or like an hour video presentation. Yeah, there are definitely ways to make it super compelling. We just got to change up how we did it before and get a little bit more creative and stuff, because I think people's attention spans are getting shorter and shorter. So
100%, right? Like just look at like we went from YouTube to like, a store, like to shorter videos. And now we're like on TikToks in 50 seconds, and it's ironic, really like TikToks now getting longer, right? Like, yeah, people want quick stuff and they want to get to the point. And, I forget if I was talking about it to someone recently, but like, it's almost like the way content gets presented is almost more important than the content itself now, right? Like I would use myself as an example. I don't think I'm necessarily coming up with revolutionary ideas and blowing people. Like maybe I'm blowing people's minds, but like, I don't feel like I'm saying anything that's like absolutely incredible. But I think what people love about my content and about me personally is just the way I present it. I'm high energy. I come out quick and I get right to the material and I engage too. Like I'm reading the chat and engaging with people. People want that sort of thing. But like you said, no, they don't want to be, if people want to watch someone get talked to them, they'll just watch it on YouTube, or they'll listen to a podcast and watch it on 2 times speed, right?
Yeah, I know. Everything seems so fast. Like I feel like TikToks are even getting shorter, and we're just
so true.
I don't know. I cannot keep up with it. And it's getting more challenging for marketing, because you got to catch them really fast, do it fast, and you have to present what you want to present in a smart way.
Yeah, totally. You have to be really intentional about it,
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing I wanted to ask you, because I'm sure you have experience with this as well, and it's I see this a lot with people that are using our platform that are putting on these type of events. So it might benefit them, are virtual networking events, which to me seems a lot harder than it would be networking in person. I could be completely wrong, but do you have any tips or engagement tips when it comes to replacing in-person networking events with virtual ones?
Yeah. Like you said, it's really hard. So I think one thing that we like became very apparent as we started coming kind of like peeking our heads out of like the proverbial doomsday bunker after the and obviously the pandemic's still going on, but it's recovering still, right? And so when we started doing that, everyone's like, oh, I'm going to attend an in-person event, and it became very obvious that virtual was really hard to do the networking piece. So like I like to think about it in this way: like in person is really good for building connections and people meeting with each other, but you know what it sucks at? Content, right? Like no one wants to sit in a chair in a ballroom and watch someone present.
In a ballroom.
Watch a TED Talk at home, right? On their own time. Or again, podcast it up, whatever it may be. And again, this isn't always 100% true. There are some speakers and presented content that's like incredible in person, right? Like, sometimes even like concerts too, right? Like there's so many virtual concerts, as great as some of these digital concerts were, and I was attending many of them, like, when I went back to my in-person concerts, I was like, oh yeah, this is kind of how the experience needs to be. So one thing I think you need to think about is you're at a disadvantage coming to virtual because it's really hard for people. But I think one of the things to think about when it comes to your networking is that it seems less like networking when you are part of something bigger than just the event. And again, this is kind of like supports my argument for community model, but like there's so many online communities where we constantly are networking, and no one ever just calls it, like, I guess some people call it networking, but like it doesn't get like the same stigma, right?
Yeah.
Like for example, like LinkedIn, let's use it. Almost everybody's on LinkedIn. Constantly we're getting connection requests, messages, we're seeing posts, we're, oh, hey, let's catch up and grab coffee and things like that. It's a very similar interaction that you have at an event. But the thing is, like, no one has problems with doing that on LinkedIn. But then you put them on like a platform and you say, I want you to do all this networking in 2 days, and you have to do it very fast. And you're like, whoa, I'm trying to get this content in. There's just so much stuff flying in. And, you're just kind of like, oh, these people don't have their profiles set up 100%, so I don't even know who's here. Some people are spamming me. It ends up just kind of being a meh experience overall. So I think what I challenge people to do is like, but this is where the community model comes in. Is if you do a community, it doesn't become networking, because it becomes more so people are just engaging with the community, engaging with each other. And then networking just naturally happens that way. And, to add a little bit to this argument is like, if you're going to a 2-day event, are you really going to go fill out your profile with all your information, all your social media links, right? Like every little piece, your headshot? Are you going to tag all your interests? Or are you going to be like, I'm going to get in, get my content, get out? But I think what happens a lot is people they want to do something really quick. Again, like make that snap decision and do that. But if you say, hey, come and join, this community that you're going to be a part of for a year, they're like, okay, I feel invested. I'm going to be here for a year. Let me really build out my profile. And a lot about networking is being able to identify people that you want to meet. And if those profiles are half filled out, that can make it really, again, difficult experience when it comes to it. So online networking can be really, really hard. It's possible. Just again, look at social media. And, I'm a part of a community online that literally I don't see most of these people in person almost ever. And I'm really, really engaged with it. And there's so many people I've met online and then met in person, and then it got solidified even further. So, and I guess that's like another point to bring with it is like the great thing about building a great online community that builds this networking is that you build these relationships online, and they've primarily been online via Zoom calls. And then what happens is you then host a hybrid event and they come in person, and those relationships are like you're taking a little small ember fire, you're throwing gasoline on it at that point, and it accelerates things so much. Like there's so many times where I show up at conferences, never have met somebody in person, but knew them through online tweets and chatting and messaging and things like that. Then you meet in person and you're like glued to their side. Like when's the last time you went to a conference and you're like, oh my God, I'm glued to this person's side from a random person I networked with? Unless you're like the only person in that conference that you don't know anybody at all, chances are no, you're going to be like, I'll be alone most of the time. Right. So all just things to think about.
No, that's a really good point. I didn't even think about, we are we already are networking. So I wonder if like the actual term like networking events or whatever are just going to become irrelevant because we already have communities that are networking all the time, constantly. We don't even realize it. And then you go back and do those community events like you're saying.
Totally. Like, okay, I'll say something I don't think I've ever said on a podcast before, but like, so I consider myself very engaged online. You know, I try to meet as many people as possible. And I kind of like straddle. I'm a little bit of this weird creature where I'm initially introverted. Like you put me in a party and I don't know anybody, I'll like grasp my like partner's hand and be like, don't leave me, please. But then you introduce me to one person, I start a conversation, boom, I can easily like then float around the room, utilize that relationship, things like that. But for me, like since the early days of even the company, you know, there was all these opportunities to go to these networking events. And I was just like, no one enjoys them. They're never good. Right? Like you meet the people who want to talk to you are usually trying to sell you things. Now, granted, like everyone wants to do that, but also like you end up getting like the conversations you have usually are very surface level, meh. And what most of my conversations are like, I want to get like a nugget in, and then I want to get your business card and let's like go have lunch later. Right? I want to get that one-on-one experience and, you know, networking instead. It's like basically saying like, let me get out of this event as soon as possible because it's not facilitating what it needs to be. And I think that's one reason why like you're right. Like the concept of online networking, I've always just been a fan of like, I'd rather just try to connect with as many people on LinkedIn as possible and share my calendar link and do a video call. And, you know, you come to Phoenix, I will happily buy you lunch and a burrito and some tea, you know, and I make that offer to people all the time. But like, I feel like some of these networking events just feel so antiquated and old, you know, and
weird
just
and old.
Weird,
old's a good one.
And awkward, and you know, all those things. So I think that's not the kind of experience anyone wants to make, right? Like, you know, and there are ways that you can design the content, like, you know, do team building exercise and ways to move past that. But let's all be honest. No one's putting that energy in. Everyone just does an open bar and has a bunch of high tops and expects it to work itself out. And the thing is, every time you walk in that room, people are all talking to each other. They all look happy and they all say how they like really appreciate the open bar. And maybe they'll even get angry if you don't have an open bar. But the problem is, if you really looked at the data of like who's interacting with who's spending time with who, the people who are talking to each other at networking events are just talking to people they already knew.
That's true. Yeah,
and
it's very forced.
Yeah. It's just not ideal, right? That's not what you wanted.
Yeah. I feel the same way like about meetings sometimes. Not for us. Our team's pretty cool, but I know like I have a few friends that work remote and they do like mandatory meetings and whatnot that are just really forced and no one wants to be there and or like team meetings where it's like, let's all do something fun, but it's like weird. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It definitely like you have to be really, really intentional with the experience.
Yes.
Like, it's not just that easy as just like throwing everybody in a room.
Let's just all go on a screen and look at each other and then it's going to go great. And then everyone's like, I don't want to be here.
Totally.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. And before I let you go, I wanted to just bring up, I know you've mentioned a few times about the equation for events, perfect solutions, kind of like what you guys do. What are some things that if an event is trying to put together their perfect solution, what are some things that they should consider in their equation?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is start with your audience, right? That's like the baseline of that equation. You got to know them really well to know what they want, right? And like this idea of planning events based on what you think is best doesn't work anymore, right? Like everyone has changed so much over the last 3 years that like whatever you thought your attendees wanted, 3 years ago, is totally changed, right? They might have said, oh yeah, I can't wait for the happy hour. I can't wait to meet up with everybody. But now they're like, I can't wait to like watch the new episode of Moon Knight on Disney Plus, right? Like,
and just be isolated by myself.
Yeah, exactly. So start with that personas piece because it'll help you make better decision making. I think the next thing is that like, it's like a dash of like creativity is necessary, right? So we call this concept crushing the box at Endless. The idea that like everyone says think outside the box, but really what you need to do is take the box and crush it and like toss it away and build something new. And I think that like a lot of times we're sitting here rehashing the same things over and over again. And what I've seen so sadly over the last 2 years is that I thought everyone was going to come out of the pandemic and be like, oh my gosh, we told we're doing events wrong. We need to engage the virtual audience. And everyone retreated back to their same playbooks they used all day long.
Oh no.
And it's scary because it's like, wait, not only are you saying that people have changed, you're doing your event exactly the same. I think what we'll see probably over the course of the next 2-3 years is so many events just wither away and die. Right. They struggled to come back out of the pandemic to get people to come. But then now with this whole everything that's changing, right? Like people, like some events are just going to really, really suffer. Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's one thing to think about when it comes to the solution. And then let me try to give one last little tip that maybe no one else is thinking about. The last little bit I think is that think about your event strategy, not as the days that everything is happening at the event, but think about how you could create an experience that can live 365 days a year times 10 years that lives on forever and ever. And if you can build that strong community now moving forward, you will be able to sell as many tickets as you want to your next event. You'll be able to, get the right feedback to have the right content. Everything will become so much easier when you're not trying to sell the single day experience and trying to sell tickets every single time. But instead, you build a community that just happens to have an event inside of it. And you'll just see so many wonders, and your job will be a lot easier as an event organizer.
Yeah, I think community is definitely a key word in all the successful events that we see. The major ones, of course, that people look forward to that everyone knows. Coachella, Burning Man has a really strong community. They all work because of that, because it brings people together, and then they're talking about it year round. And they're like, I can't wait, it's coming up again. And I'm sure they they have to market, but it's not as hard as these other events. You know what I mean?
Totally. They're not having to run Facebook ads year round to promote their next tier tickets. So like Burning Man tickets were on sale like last week. And like I was literally, people were like, I'm going to be on this call, but just so you know, I'm going to be trying to buy my Burning Man ticket.
Yeah,
then,
see?
They describe themselves as burners all year long, right? Yeah. Like it's not about the event. It's about being an associated identity with that.
Creating something.
That community. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's a really solid point. Creating this identity, and then your event's just like part of it, but it's not the main focus.
Exactly.
It's weird. It's a weird thing to think about because the event is the event, but yes, I understand completely.
Totally. Yeah. Again, I'll give like one final tip to think about. I kind of teased at this idea, like your event is just a part of the community, but like if you design a community first and then you have a yearly event or, a monthly event or something like that, it's so much easier for you to put that all on one single platform and then just have everyone already signed up. They already have their login, and that part of it is maybe even they join this community and pay a monthly fee to be part of it. And then, they get a discounted ticket on a ticket, or maybe their conference tickets included as part of it. Like, oh my gosh, like how exciting is that? Like, and it gives you this opportunity to take those like pre-recorded content, like webinars and things like that, sprinkle it in as part of the community. And now it's not just about one day of the event, but you can almost turn it into the event is constantly going on. And I think that's an exciting future for us.
Yeah. And it's building a whole sense of loyalty too, because like you said, if you offered like a discounted ticket and whatnot, now you're acknowledging them and giving back to them, for being part of that. So just something to think about, but 100% agree. Well, thank you so much for coming onto the show and giving all this wonderful advice that is going to help everyone.
I appreciate that. It's very kind of you. Thank you.